DraftKings. This is the college football playoff semifinal betting preview, the bowl betting preview part six. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Collin Wilson, Mike Calabrese, and Josh Nunn, aka Duck. We are presented by DraftKings. We will obviously be talking about both semifinal games, one on Thursday night, the other on Friday night. We'll break them down in depth, give our thoughts. We'll put together a parlay presented by Sling TV for the Miami Ole Miss game. Just hit a big one. What was the one we hit last week? 15 to 1, I think was the official payout. David, let
Yep.
me know what the final price was on that. And we will give our favorite bets of the entire semifinal at the end. Before we do get started, I'll throw to myself for a quick word from our sponsor, DraftKings. The Big Bets on Campus podcast has teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook, where new customers can bet $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if your bet wins. Stay in on the action and use your bonus bets on DraftKings same game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. To get started, use code BBOC when signing up with DraftKings. Again, use code BBOC when signing up and bet $5 to get 300 back in bonus bets if your bet wins. The crown is yours. All right, gentlemen. I guess before we get to the FBS semifinals, what a final we had in the FCS. One of the better championship type games. I mean, that went from Illinois State needing a fourth down conversion or the game was over, down 14, to then in position to win, to then going, a field goal blocked, to then going to overtime, extra point block, and then a touchdown, a game-winning, national title-winning fourth and 10 completion in overtime. That game was insane, Doc.
It was absolutely perfect cinematic TV. You had Illinois State that probably had some regrets on decisions they made in the first half, going ultra conservative after drives crossed midfield. You had Montana State really look unstoppable on offense. They looked really good in the first half. Illinois State was dead to rights and they came back yet again. And it was just kind of, you feel bad for that kicker that it came down to a blocked field goal and blocked extra point. But my oh my, with Montana State, they almost maybe had to feel like here we go again, blowing a chance to win the national championship. But the way that they made plays in overtime when they had to have it, that was nuts. It was and just an incredible final. And what an atmosphere too. Such a better atmosphere at night in Nashville as opposed to the mid-afternoon or morning kickoffs that we saw in Frisco for so many years. I think they made a really good decision putting it in this venue. And yeah, it was just an awesome, awesome football game. It was fun to get to the window on some of those bets.
Yeah, good call on the over, but let's get in to the FBS, the main show, the college football playoff semifinals. We have, I don't know, does anyone have a perfect bracket out there? I doubt it. We have, I know when Colin still, when the podcast first came out, I did say Indiana is going to win it all. That was my pick. Sticking to it. Colin, do you want to change before we get to the games? Do you want to
I
change your pick? Who?
I
Uh,
said Indiana against Georgia that way. I mean,
yeah.
who's got that side of the bracket right? I mean, Miami. I mean, I'm going to the Fiesta Bowl tomorrow. Miami, Ole Miss. I couldn't have dreamed. I couldn't have dreamed that's what I was. I thought I was flying to Ohio State, Georgia. It's crazy.
Well,
Nobody had that.
are you changing Indiana winning it all? Are you changing your pick?
No, actually, I think Oregon's going to win it all. We got to talk about it.
Wow. Duck, who'd you originally think was going to win it all? And who do you think is winning it all now?
Yeah, I didn't really make a bold proclamation on who I thought was going to win. You
But
kind of thought that.
did you have a thought like, all right, this team, or did you not really know?
I mean, I kind of thought Ohio State could have made a deep run. I thought that close loss against Indiana would have really helped them situationally. It didn't play out that way. Indiana looks really, really strong. I would not bet against Signetti right now based on who we have left.
Calabrese, did you have a feeling originally and then did you change it?
Originally, I like Georgia over Indiana. I think Georgia, if Nate Frazier doesn't get hurt, I think they pound in that touchdown late. I think it's a different situation, but obviously he did, had a huge impact there. And when you talk perfect bracket, I thought you were teeing me up that I'm 8-0 in college football playoff games here on this show in terms of picks. So I'm excited to potentially get to the window at 11-0 in these playoff games this year. Can't say I've ever done that since probably like seventh grade, going 32-0 on picks straight up in the first round of the NCAA tournament, March Madness. That's the closest I've ever been to something perfect in a tournament setting like this. So I'm excited to keep it rolling.
All right, well, let's get into the games. Let's start on Thursday night. Kind of it's a little weird. We have Miami and Ole Miss headed out to Arizona to play, and then we have Oregon in Atlanta. Oregon could be going, I mean, they could be going all over the place from Eugene. They're traveling all over the country. And if they win and Miami wins, by the way, it's going to be in Miami. Uh, so keep that in mind. But Oregon is traveling up. Oregon, Indiana will be in Atlanta, and Miami, Ole Miss will be in Glendale for the VRBO Fiesta Bowl. Miami is let's call it 3.25 point favorite, between 3 and 3.5. Uh, Calabrese, congrats on your start, but I have to say, I think it ends here. Total 51.5, 52. You like Miami. I think you're wrong, but I'll let you start off and make your case.
Sure. Let's get it started with the March Madness analogy I just had. You've seen these Cinderellas. Now, clearly, Ole Miss isn't a Cinderella by any basketball standards, but they weren't supposed to be here. And a lot of this has been driven on emotion, on spite, sticking it to Lane Kiffin, having the emotional home playoff win over Tulane, and then really playing a game of a lifetime against Georgia, who I mentioned they won it on the field, but if Georgia has a full deck there late in the game, I think they just give it to Frazier and get in the end zone. But the thing that interests me the most is now as they go, pack it all up, go across country again, they're in a position where who's coaching this team? Because Kevin Smith was out, but now he's back in. You have the passing game coordinator in Joe Cox, who's also the receiving coach. He's now down in Baton Rouge, the tight ends coach as well. You got Charlie Weiss, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think there's a bit of a brain drain situation here, and I don't think that it can be overstated in a game like this because when I look at Miami and what they're bringing to the table in terms of coaching, Shannon Dawson has done an incredible job coaching them up. And when you look at what he was able to do against Ohio State defense that was elite, including that like fake quarterback draw swing pass in the red zone, I was very impressed with some of the wrinkles that he put on tape. But Corey Heatherman is the reason why I'm on the Canes in this game. If you lay 3.5, you can get even money out there in the market. He's done an incredible job. And when you look at that game flipping, pick six, that was coaching. That wasn't just a player just instinctually saying, I'm going to jump this route and potentially be out of position and give up a touchdown behind me. Scott was able to do that because he had seen that on tape. His position coach had coached him up, and Heatherman put him in a spot where he wanted him to be aggressive. And when you look at this Ole Miss offense, Chambliss is obviously the engine. But there's been a couple occasions where he's been pressured consistently, and all of a sudden the ceiling on this Rebel offense has come down a little bit. The two games I'd like to point to were Wazoo and Florida. Wazoo got home 3 times, but also created 11 pressures, nearly pull off, a catastrophic upset from an Ole Miss perspective as 33-point dogs. They end up losing by 3 in that game. And then Florida, a team that underwhelmed for the entire season, they were able to create 10 pressures in that game, and they were leading in the fourth quarter. So I think the game here is all in the trenches. And if you can consistently pressure Chambliss, you have an opportunity. And what does Miami have in spades? They have talent on both sides of the line, but particularly on the defensive side, best pass rush, havoc-minded front seven, and a ball hawking mentality, 25 takeaways, ninth in the entire country. So I think they're going to be able to get it done to, let's call it 24 points, keep them from absolutely exploding. I know that the recency bias of this is saying, well, if Georgia couldn't, keep him, at bay, what chance does anyone have? This just wasn't the Georgia team of yesteryear defensively. They struggled for long stretches of the season creating pressure, and you saw it just not being able to get to him. He was having these long extended plays that, you can't put it on your secondary to cover for 7 seconds. When it flips around, Miami has the football. We've given so much shit, rightfully so, to Mario Cristobal over the years of not being able to handle leads, of wilting down the stretch. But the coaching's been really strong in this playoff run. And I think it's pretty simple in that they were able to run the ball for 153 yards on the Silver Bullets at Ohio State, run defense. When you look at Ole Miss, they got to be licking their chops. 65th in rushing success rate defensively, but 92nd in line yards. I think this Miami line is going to punch open some big holes for Mark Fletcher, who, by the way, has elevated himself to sixth nationally per PFF in terms of running back grade. I think he's going to have a big game. I think he's going to get in the end zone. And if they can get to 27, 31 points, I think it's going to be enough. So I'm going to go with this being the situation where the Rebels' magical season finally dies in the desert. I play Miami up all the way to edge of a full touchdown if you're interested in maybe watching a drive or two, and then you have to take a discount in the opposite direction on a live number. I still think -6.5 is good with the Canes.
I completely disagree. I like Ole Miss here. I make this like 2.5, 2.55. So I like anything over a field goal, even like plus 3.5 -115. I think just right now we are, or many people in the market is underestimating Trinidad Chambliss. Like he's playing at, I don't know, like the way that it looks is he's playing at like a peak Lamar Jackson, peak like Kyler Murray in college level. As of right now, he's almost unpressurable. I mean, you look at their pressure rate, his sack rate, and that is the key to playing Miami. Miami's defense is predicated on Bain and Messidor wrecking havoc in the backfield. Because if they don't get home, this Miami team, they're aggressive under Heatherman, who's done a tremendous job. They will give up explosive plays. And Ole Miss is as capable of hitting explosive plays as any team in the country. I think Chambliss can buy enough time. I mean, you might have to scramble backwards 20 yards, but then this Miami secondary is gettable. Additionally, I think they're going to use super fast tempo. Bain, Mestor, we saw him during the 2-minute drill. Ohio State was a snail again. I think they can wear them down. That tempo is going to be a tool. And I just think right now, Ole Miss has the better offense. I mean, Miami's offense, what have they done? Fletcher broke like 2 runs in 2 games. Other than that, they didn't do anything. I think Beck has thrown for 220 yards in 2 games, and that's because they didn't have to do much because their defensive line wreaked havoc on both teams. And Reed was just bad, sane as a statue. That is not the case with Chambliss. Is Miami going to be able to run the ball? Absolutely. But they're not that explosive of a rushing attack, which I think will help Ole Miss. But Ole Miss is, I believe, they could always change their game plan. But schematically, what Ole Miss generally does under Golding is that they're going to play a ton of zone. They're going to play bend but don't break. Don't give up anything explosive. And Miami's not an explosive offense, in generally speaking. They're gonna move the ball down the field. They're gonna be able to run the ball, and then Ole Miss is gonna hope for stops in the red zone. But I think from an explosive play perspective, this is gonna be so heavily tilted in Ole Miss's direction, and this can't be a game where Beck just manages the game and they just let him, let's just not let Carson Beck make mistakes. I think this is a game where Beck might make a couple key mistakes. I think Ole Miss can get some pressure. But I just think Chambliss right now is underrated. I think this is closer. This should be under a field goal, in my opinion, closer to a coin flip. And I have the special teams edge. Ole Miss might have the best special. I mean, they just outplayed Georgia special teams. I think as of right now, S&P plus they're number one in special teams now. I mean, Carnero is an absolute weapon. I still don't trust Miami's kicking situation. Additionally, more plays, more opportunities for this Miami team to mess up. Mario tried to mess up the A&M game by not going down at the 1, but the discipline. Miami is one of the most undisciplined teams in the country. They're, I think, the 110th in penalties per game. Ole Miss around national average, around 55th, 60th. But this, to me, just comes down to Chambliss making plays, being able to evade that pressure, hitting explosive plays down the field, Ole Miss playing their bend but don't break, force Beck into a mistake or two. I think this game goes back and forth throughout. I additionally like the over. Now, what scares me is just if the game script where Miami. The other thing is Ole Miss right now, what Golding has showed me is that he kind of has some Lane Kiffin in me. He's going to be aggressive. Um, And Miami, when they get leads, and just in general, Mario will be a little bit more conservative. I like having the more aggressive coach in a high stakes game like this. But the thing that does scare me is because I do think Miami will be able to run the ball. They're not the most explosive team. Is just if they do indeed have these 6, 7 minute drives. Now this will help the Ole Miss side, but they end in a couple field goals. Then it might be tough to get this over. But I think that Ole Miss is going to control this pace, and then I think the Miami offense will look. They're going to have to open it up, and this is a much easier test than Ohio State. So I would look at the over as well. Colin, I made my case for Ole Miss. Calabrese made his case for Miami. You like, I guess, part of mine. You like Ole Miss in the first half.
Well, I have an 18-1 on Ole Miss future too, so I'm with you. But I think the better bet's the first half. And go ahead. Did you want to set up what all I
I
had?
thought you were supposed to talk. Is that it? And you're done
Yeah,
for the
no,
day?
I
Okay.
mean, I
Thanks for
wrote
coming out.
I wrote a book. I wrote a novel on this game. Kind of gave it the national championship treatment. So I'm completely behind you on everything that you said, and I'm against a lot of the things I heard Calabrese say. So let me go ahead and weave through my novel here and try to point out the thing with this Ole Miss team is the more I kept diving, the more layers I kept going. I said, oh my God, there are so many other things that are good about this team other than Chambliss. There are so many factors here that my eye just has not seen until I got into the numbers. First off, I like the over in this game. The Fiesta Bowl, the Verbo Fiesta Bowl is almost always an over game. Go back to 2019 when Clemson and Ohio State played.
Field
Take Trevor
conditions.
Lawrence and Justin Fields. Yeah, they roll that turf in. Guys, there is a video out there of me like 3, 4 years ago on the field at the Fiesta Bowl before the TCU Michigan game, feeling the grass, showing everybody there's still precip on it when they roll it in. Who's that advantage of? That's the advantage of the offensive player that can make the cut. I like the, and by the way, what happened in that TCU Michigan game? What was there, 96 points in that semifinal? I like the over here just for that reason alone, that the offenses get to dictate where the cuts are going to be made. Now, they both have a common opponent. They both played Florida. Both of them beat them, same yards per play. There's no real takeaways from that. I'll start with Ole Miss with Keywan Lacy because you got to start on the ground with Lacy. What he does behind right guard Patrick Kudus, transfer from Arkansas, is amazing. It doesn't matter if it's in the A gap or the B gap. He averages 7 yards per attempt on 73 runs this season. They're doing inside zone and power concepts. Kudus is 15th among all guards in PFF run block rating. I didn't know he was that high. I know he was a little bit overweight and he was lazy at Arkansas. And when he transferred to Ole Miss, I said, good riddance. I didn't know he was the 15th best run blocking guard in the entire FBS of guards. So that one kind of got my attention. He's going up against Justin Scott, David Blay, Ahmad Moten, who just showed up as questionable on the availability report. I didn't even know that. But this is the defensive interior that he's going to go up against with Miami. None of those guys are in the top 100 when it comes to defensive interior run defenders per PFF. Huge advantage for the Ole Miss offensive line. Huge advantage for Keywan Lacy. I didn't even know Miami's defensive interior was not that great at defending the run. It kind of shows up in their overall numbers, but Lacy's on a heater. 10 rushing TDs and 15 explosives in the last 5 games. I mean, he cannot be stopped. The Miami D dominated all run concepts this year, except for inside zone and specifically on the right side of the line where Kudus is. So you just might as well line Lacy up behind Kudus and go. Now, let's talk about Bain and Messidor. That is the elephant in the room. Can they get to Chambliss? I think the answer is no. First off, Bain and Messidor, I thought were like the best pass rushers in the nation. They barely slip in the top 35 in PFF's pass rush productivity. I thought they were better than that. Who are they going to go up against? Blindside tackle Diego Pounds for Ole Miss over at the left tackle. Top 100 of all pass blockers in FBS, has not allowed a sack this entire season and only allowed 5 pressures against an SEC schedule. What about the other side? Messidor was the big name here in this last round that we just played. He's going to get Jaden Williams at right tackle. Has allowed 2 sacks this season, only 4 pressures in the last 6 games for Ole Miss. He's also on a heater on the right side of that offensive line. I think Chambliss plays
Those
a
are Chambliss stats too, though. Just his
they are,
ability, just
but
his ability to elude pressure and
you'd be
not take sacks.
you'd be a little bit shocked that he doesn't have as much scramble yards as you would think. Like the offensive line is doing a lot of good work here, and I think the fact that Chambliss has a history of carving up cover three, 58% success rate. Miami's 119th in PFF tackling. No one's mentioned this yet.
Yeah, they missed a
They
ton
give
of they missed a ton of tackles, and on those field conditions, I was going to bring that up. I
93rd,
think in
yeah.
missed tackle rate, they're 132nd in college football.
93rd in broken tackles allowed. I love broken tackles allowed. Miami allows a lot of them. And in the Hurricanes, they missed 25 tackles and gave up 8 explosives against Texas A&M and Ohio State. Ole Miss is ripe for protecting their quarterback, having Lacey power over the right side of that line, and then there's just a plethora of inside targets. Like Chambliss has killed it in between the hash marks. Who's that going to be? It's going to be Caden Lee, Winston Watkins, Daquan Wright. Sometimes Devon Stribling lines up in the slot and goes over the middle, but they're going to go up against Keontae Scott, who played a great game in the last round, and Muhammad Torre, a linebacker who's can be taken advantage of easily, which is why I like Daquan Wright, the tight end, has shown up for Ole Miss in all the big pressure games. I got it, I think, over 23 and a half yards. It's 25 and a half yards as we're recording this. I'm not sure about his touchdowns. I'm not sure he's going to get that look. But Daquan Wright getting over 25 and a half yards, I think, is a play that you have to have. Um, Also, I have to mention Luke Haas, right? Now,
Is this why
also,
you like Ole Miss? Because this is like the
like
closest you'll
Arkansas,
get to Arkansas winning a national title. You got
Arkansas
Udis
Eats. I
and
mean, Luke
Haas.
Haas took his helmet off, and I forgot that the man had a receding hairline at 19 years old. Poor guy. Look, the fact that Haas got a target in the last 2 games and he got the first TD score against Georgia, like this was Arkansas's best player, and then had an ankle injury, wasn't supposed to play the entire year, and now he's in the rotation of getting targets in the red zone, and I can't even find him on boards for first TD on most books. Now, thankfully, DK has plus 550 anytime TD. I dipped into that because I think Luke Haas is now a part of the rotation for the red zone. I think Miami's got a chance to score points too, though. I do like the over, but I don't think it's going to be good enough. Fletcher, 262 yards. You mentioned the big runs that he's had inside zone, man blocking assignments. Ole Miss has been shredded by those 46% success rate or worse. So I do like Fletcher as a prop to get over his 86 yards, but can Beck kind of win this game for them? I don't think so. There's no explosives here. The methodicals that they've been created have been had a little bit of assist from the defenses that they're going up against. I like Ole Miss in the first half. Now, Stuck, I'm riding with my 18-1. I'm not going to kill that. I need Ole Miss to win this game. I like the first half better for this reason. We've mentioned the coaching staff for Ole Miss. Charlie Weiss, who does he have to turn to for adjustments? All the stuff is happened in the first 2 quarters. Is he just going to brainstorm this and do this on his own? Does he have a running back coach, a tight end coach? Does he have anybody to talk to bounce
Yeah,
ideas
that's the
off?
real elephant in the room. What is the impact of that?
Who are the
No one knows.
eyeballs in
This
the
is
press box?
unprecedented situation.
There's no eyeballs in the press box to radio down and say, we need to move over to a 12 personnel or we need to start going over this side. Like there's no one there. So Ole Miss first half for me, because I think the adjustments are going to play into Miami and what they're going to do defensively. But I like the over. I like Ole Miss in the first half. I'm not hedging off my 18-1 future. Um, I think Fletcher goes over his numbers because frankly, Ole Miss's secondary being top 10 in pass EPA allowed, top 10 in contested catch rate. I didn't know this. I didn't know the Rebels were that good in pass defense. Did you guys know they were that good against
Yeah,
explosives in
their
big
pass
big
defense has
windows?
been excellent all year,
And Miami doesn't
and
throw it to them.
they don't allow explosives. Miami's not going to get many explosives here. I mean, uh, you could always have Tony break one, get him on a
Good.
screen anytime he touches the ball. But this is going to be about like how many times, how consistent. Miami's going to be able to run the ball, and they're going to be able to move it. But I think it's just going to be more difficult for them to do that consistently if Ole Miss is able to hit explosives and score at the rate I think that they will. Now, if they can't and Bain and Mestor are wrecking havoc, then Miami doesn't have to. They can just control the ball and play like they played in the first 2 games against A&M and Ohio State. I think they're going to have to get into the high 20s, 30s to win this game. And
Well,
I don't trust Beck. I just give me the better
I
quarterback
don't
right now.
either.
Give me Chambliss and the better offense
Better
and
offensive line,
better special teams.
better secondary, the better tackling team. I didn't realize Ole Miss had all this stuff. And the last thing I'll say, because it really ties into what Duck's going to play, Ole Miss is a first half scoring team. They are ninth in FBS in first half scoring, 20.6 points per half. Not sure how that affects, wanting to take an over under in the first half, but what I do know is Ole Miss's best punch is coming straight out of the gate. And I don't have a lot of faith in an offensive staff that is depleted themselves, right? Who's Charlie Weiss going to bounce ideas off of? I worry about Ole Miss in the second half, but I'll take Ole Miss first half.
Just real quick, better offensive line. You think it's Ole Miss?
No,
Patrick Kudus is a bulldozer right now.
Collins
7 yards
bias
per
on
play.
Patrick Kudus. Overall, Miami has got a better offensive line. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk apples to apples, they both played the Florida Gators. The Gators had 1 sack against Miami. They had 5 against Chambliss. And I absolutely agree. One of the big with shining lights, on it is that Miami has had issues tackling this year. There's nowhere you can hide from that. Somehow they held the number 13 and the number 11 offenses in SP plus in A&M and M and Ohio State to 17 total points. And it's because this line can wreck drives. And Chambliss, like, listen, I know that Marcel Reed, we can say after the fact, oh, they weren't ready. They looked like shit. Miami had a big part in that. They sacked him 7 times. They beat him up. They were able to contain him at certain times. They weren't, he wasn't making plays outside of the tackles. So you guys have made it, your compelling case. I just think it's interesting, from your perspective, Colin. You were kind of waiting for the bottom to drop out on Ole Miss last week against Georgia. But now all of a sudden, all the stats say that this team can't be beaten, and Chambliss is a one-man wrecking crew. This kind of strikes me as one of those opportunities to grab an elite defensive line. And I don't do this very often, but whatever the numbers are on Bain and Mesidor, it seems like NFL executives are enamored with these guys. They just had, what, 3.5 tackles for loss in the last game. I have a lot of faith in a 4-man rush to throw off what Ole Miss wants to do. And Heatherman's someone that I've been in love with since his Minnesota days. So I'm going to go with the better defense. Sometimes it's just where your conviction's at. I think you're splitting it a little bit by going first half. I don't necessarily hate that angle. I think that Ole Miss is going to be able to, put some explosive plays out there. The turf does concern me a little bit. We'll see if, the coaching staff has to know it. This has to be something that has to be discussed inside of their coaching room because at least they have 17 coaches and Ole Miss they're the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meme where everyone's looking around and no one's there. They have to be talking about it in terms of the cleats they're wearing, the preparation, everything else. But if there's going to be explosives, it probably would lend itself to Ole Miss having value in the first half.
FYI, Bain and Messidor were gassed. You better believe Ole Miss is coming out with tempo. They
Yeah,
had to
they're gonna
take
go.
plays off. They had to come out like they were gassed. They didn't have
Yeah,
it
they're
in
gonna
this
go.
game.
They're gonna go super tempo. I also would mention like the Miami A&M game. You can throw some of the offensive stats out on both sides. Like the case that against Miami's offense. I mean A&M's defense isn't elite, but
And also, Miami
there was a
missed
ton of wind. There
three
was a
field
ton
goals
of wind
in
in
that
that
game,
game. Like
too. So,
no, I'm just saying there was a ton of wind that impacted
yeah,
the kicks, the downfield passing,
that's fair.
which kind of like just turned that game into a
I
complete
blame the
grind.
Jefferson pilot time slot.
A field position. Yeah, I will say you brought up, by the way, this is Mario versus Joe Judge clock management. Whoever is winning with 2 minutes to go is not going to the national title. Um, you brought up Ole Miss 18 to 1. I got a couple DMs. I always get DMs about should I hedge? I can't answer that for you because like it depends on like what does the money mean to you? Why did you place the bet? Do you actually like the other side now? What was your goal when you placed the bet? What's your financial situation? What's your risk aversion level? I mean, I could go on and on. I'd have to be like a personal financial advisor. But the one thing I can tell you in regards to hedging is like if you have 18 to 1. So like we'll just make it easy. Say you have $100 on Ole Miss 18 to 1 to win 1800 and you said, "Okay, I just want to make, some profit." Well, Miami is we'll call it minus 165 on the money line. So say you wanted to make you wanted to guarantee $100 in profit. So you bet 330 to win 200, right? And then say Ole Miss goes down, you win your $200 bet, you lose your $100 future, you profited $100. The problem there is that if Ole Miss wins, your $100 to win $1,800 bet moves on, but you're down 330 on your hedge. And if Indiana wins, Indiana's probably going to be minus 300 ish. Probably be like a touchdown favorite. Now it depends on how Ole Miss looks, how Indiana wins, but we'll call it seven minus. We'll call it like minus 300. Just to, if you wanted to then profit $100, you wanted to guarantee your $100 again. Well, you have a $100 future. You lost 330 on your first hedge, so you're down 430. You got to win 530. So at minus 300, then you'd have to bet, uh, 1590 just to win 100. Well, that's 1590. The future is going to be $1,800. So it doesn't make sense. People always want to hedge way too early. This is just two games with an 18 to 1 and there's a spread of a field goal, but it just goes to show you how quickly it can turn on you. So,
There's also the option stuck. It's worth mentioning. If you think Indiana, because I agree, if it's Indiana Ole Miss, they're going to be a huge money line favorite, but they're plus 140 out on DraftKings right now to win the whole thing. So, I mean, there's different ways you can go about it in terms of grabbing a piece. And then if it is Oregon that advances, then you're closer to maybe a minus 170, minus 200 situation. So all of a sudden the math is like a little bit back in your favor, but I agree. It's not the best situation when you're holding a team that's potentially going to be a heavy underdog in the next round.
For
I
those
would
of
I would
you
just let it ride. Now, obviously, it
that
depends on the amounts and everything. And you kind of got screwed because they play first. It
Right.
would have been better if Oregon, Indiana played first. But keep in mind the live market, right? Like this total is 52, could be a little wild. So if Ole Miss goes up, and then you can get Miami as a dog at some point as part of your hedge, and then there's a chance that you could middle too. That might be a little bit more reasonable. But I just want to bring that
DK
up.
usually has live odds on the national title too during the middle of the game. But I'll just throw in my 2 cents because we're just 2 years removed from me taking a 100 to 1 Washington ticket into the national title game, which I had $500 on. So, like, and we talked about this extensively on this podcast. It's like my goal in the semifinals with Washington was to get my investment back to my measly $500, right? It paid out 50,000. It was just to get my investment back. Fast forward to Houston the next week, Michigan's minus 4.5, and I've got 7 different books, and I had $22,000 down to hedge out of the 50,000 that would have paid off for Washington. So semifinals, get your investment back, and then it is all up to your discretion when you get to the big game.
I have this is my favorite. Well, my favorite national title feature is when I sorry, Colin, for bringing this up. Ohio State 50 to 1 in
I remember
2014 after they lost to Tech. I just pulled one out. My second favorite. I was ahead of the curve. I had Arizona State to win the national title in this was placed New Year's Eve 2021. In 2022, 150 to 1, 400 to win 60,000 on Jaden Daniels when he was at Arizona State. Obviously
that.
that can even come close. But it's one of my I have a stack full of hilarious tickets, futures tickets. Duck, we forgot it's like did you take a nap? Sorry. Yeah, you've just been sitting back listening. Curious to get your thoughts. Colin kind of alluded to it. You like the first half under, but what are your thoughts on the side? We've been kind of arguing back and forth. Are you siding with Chambliss? Or are you siding with Beck and the Miami defensive line? What are your thoughts here?
Well, first off, I think we've seen two good data points now from Miami on what the game plan is that they're going to deploy, and I don't think they have to really go off script on that. So I don't expect Carson Beck to drop back and throw the ball around here a ton, specifically in the first half. I think Miami will be able to move the ball on the ground against Ole Miss's defensive front seven, and that's the path for them being methodical. It's not going to be a lot of pace, it's not going to be a lot of explosivity, but they will be methodical and they'll be able to possess the ball and move it on the ground. I was encouraged by Ole Miss's defensive front and how they played against Georgia, 2 sacks, 9 TFLs. So I think there's an ability for Ole Miss's defense to step up and stall these drives out, which will result in punts and long fields the other way. I'm worried about the Miami front. I think you look at a group that's got 48 sacks, 95 tackles for loss. We've already talked about the guys that are going to create a problem for Ole Miss, and I don't think the operation is going to look like it's looked all season for Trinidad Chambliss. I don't think he's going to be able to ad lib off the cuff when things go off schedule and just create plays like he's shown this ability to do. And that's not a knock on his play because he's been exquisite this year. But one thing that's real interesting here is these first couple of games for Ole Miss, playing with a truncated staff and a hodgepodge of different players coaching at the various different position groups, is they had already played Tulane, they had already played Georgia. You really only had to roll out a partial install for the opponents that they were playing during these first couple of playoff games. Now with a full prep install and an abbreviated staff, and you've got all these guys that are doing different things and exerting bandwidth to their new job and trying to stay focused. I just worry about how things show up, like pass protection, and if we get the right shift from the running back to pick up the blitz, or if that gets missed, or does a receiver have to alter the way that his route is run due to the coverages he's going to see? Well, that all comes out in the install practices leading up to. Now you've got a one less day to do that with the way that the game schedule played out, and you're installing against an opponent you hadn't faced, which they have not had to do yet during this playoff run. That's why I think the first half could look a little wonky. I think these guys are going to have to get some snaps under their belt, get into the half and make some adjustments, at which point, sure, all hell could break loose. But I think we've seen the game plan for Miami. They've only had one offensive touchdown scored in the first half of both of their two playoff games combined, 0-0 against A&M, 14-0 against Ohio State. And I just feel like it's going to take a little while for Ole Miss with this. It's just going to be such an unprecedented situation with the lack of coaching staff and the lack of consistency week to week. I think it's trouble.
How about from the side perspective? Who do you think eventually comes out on top?
I think Miami is the only team that would have a reasonable chance to challenge Oregon or Indiana, and I think that that defensive line is just playing too well right now. So I will give a tiny lean to the Canes.
All right, should be a good one. Regardless, I can't wait to watch it. And sometimes college football can be unexpected, like 10 seed Miami beating number one Ohio State outright, or Alabama putting up a complete dud against Indiana. But one thing you can count on is never missing a moment of these college football playoff games with Sling TV. Sling TV offers flexible package options of 1, 3, and 7-day passes for access to 30 plus live channels, which includes ESPN and TNT. So you're covered for the upcoming semifinal games, the national championship, and more. Well, we just got done talking Miami Ole Miss, so let's put together a same game parlay in that game. It's going to pay around 36 to 1 at DraftKings. We just hit our most recent Sling TV parlay in the quarterfinals that paid, I think, somewhere around 7, 8 to 1. I'm going to go Ole Miss team total over 23 and a half. I like the over, I like Ole Miss. Think they at least get to 24 here. Lots of explosives, up tempo. I think this is a higher scoring game, especially on that field. Colin, what do you want to put in?
Yeah, I mentioned Mark Fletcher having the avenue through the Ole Miss defense to get some yards here. Over 86 and a half in his rushing prop. I like the over in that. Fletcher has been such a big part of the Miami offense. This is not an offense that creates explosive plays on the ground or through the air. And I think that the only way that they can stay in standard downs is if Fletcher does his work. So you can take advantage of this Ole Miss defensive line. You just can't pass on him. That's in favor of Mark Fletcher getting his yards.
Duck, what do you want to put in here?
We'll go first half under for the reasons that I had stated earlier, but I just think we'll see the script stay on point for what we've seen in Miami first halves during these playoffs. And I think red zone defense and pass rush will win the first half. I think we'll see under 26 and a half.
Breeze?
Canes laying the 3.5. They dominate the trenches. They put the shackles on Chambliss for stretches. He's still going to make big plays, but not enough for Ole Miss to win this game. They end up pulling it out by a touchdown thanks to their offensive line, open up big holes for Fletcher all night long.
All right, so last week we hit plus 731. We have a Ole Miss over, a first half under, and Miami. So this one's going to pay a lot more. Looking at around 36 to 1 at DraftKings. So with so many great games still to come, Sling TV is your solution to instant access to live TV starting as low as $4.99. There isn't a better time to acquaint yourself with 1, 3, and 7-day passes from Sling TV. Offer applies to Orange 1-day pass. Restrictions apply. All right, let's get to the second game. Friday night, Oregon, Indiana. Indiana, 3.5-point favorite in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Total, we'll call it 47-ish as of right now. This game will kick Friday, 7:30 Eastern on ESPN. It's a rematch from earlier this season when Indiana went to Eugene and frankly pretty much dominated that game. They did so I went back and watched that game. So I was like, all right, what well, first of all, what has changed? Like, there's some things that have changed with Oregon and with Indiana. A couple injuries. Oregon, by the way, has lost a couple backs, including Davison, who has a broken clavicle. They still have, Whittington and Hill, but their depth at running back, one of their strengths is they just roll out a number of guys, has been tested. But when I went back and watched that game, it's it was because if you look at just the rosters, right? Oregon has more pure talent. So if you just look at like stars and blue chips, but Indiana has more grown men, right? They're all like seniors are all old. They were the more physical team. They dominated that game at the line of scrimmage on both sides. They pressured Dante Moore, and he has been very bad under pressure this year. And he's been very lucky against the blitz. And you got to think about some of the teams he's faced that blitz or impoverished defenses. And whenever Dante Moore has gone up against like a really good defense, the Oregon offenses look pretty pedestrian. But they pressured him on over 50, close to 50% of his dropbacks. He was under fire all day long. And one of the reasons that I was worried about Texas Tech last week is they're not efficient at running the ball. Well, that's not the case with Indiana. That's what you want to do against Oregon. Run the ball, get into third and manageable situations, and I think that's what Indiana is going to be able to do here. And this Indiana team is just every time out there under Sig, they just out execute everybody. And I think that's how they're going to win this game. And if you just match up, like, okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses? These are obviously two elite teams. The strengths and weaknesses of both teams. Like Indiana, you can hit them aggressive defense. You can hit them for some explosives, but Oregon's not like particularly explosive. I don't think they're going to hit a ton of explosives here. The main difference, and then you look at, okay, well, we're going to be able to run the ball. Not really against Indiana. So I think they're going to be in more third and long situations where those pressure packages, which have been amazing from Indiana and that defensive staff all year, are going to come into play again. We'll see what the adjustments from Oregon is, right? They're going to adjust from the blitzes but Indiana is going to have some adjustments too. So there's a nice cat and mouse game there. But the one weakness here, or like when you overlap these teams, is the Indiana offensive line in the run game versus the Oregon defensive line. They should be able to get a push here. That should set them up for third and manageable. Indiana's number one in the country in average third down distance. I think that's where they win this game. Indiana just a little better offense, a little better defense, grown men. And I'll sum it up in like five stats or four stats. Third down defense, Indiana's fourth in the country, 29%. Oregon is 41st. Indiana, third down offense, number one by a wide margin at 55%. It's a number you rarely see. Maybe, I don't know, five or six teams over the last 10 years have hit that clip if you exclude a couple Army teams from 2017-18. Oregon, 28th. Giveaways per game. Indiana, 0.6, fourth in the country. I mean, they're top five in all these do you beat yourself stats. Oregon, zero point 0.9, still very good, but 21st. How about penalties per game? Indiana, 3.4, third. Oregon, 5.2, 33rd. So like all of these like execution, well coached, third downs, offense, third down defense, the high leverage downs, penalties, turnovers. I think all of those tilt towards Indiana. Grown men in the trenches. I think that's where they get it done. I think Indiana wins this game, but I make it like four. So I want a three. I do have a bunch of Indiana money line exposure to close out a couple parlays that I'll just be riding with. If this number gets down to three, I'll be adding to Indiana. We'll look for them live. Money line is a dog as well. But I think that's where they win this game. I think this will be a really competitive game. I'm so curious to see what the adjustments are because this is a rematch, right? And that might give a little bit of an edge to Oregon because maybe they're more likely to make the adjustments. But I trust this Indiana team and this staff to come up with some adjustments and not do the same things they did from a defensive perspective. Mendoza, I think his legs might come into play here. That's a spot where Oregon is a little more vulnerable. Why not use his legs? I mean, maybe you're like the kid's future, but like this is to go to the national championship. Use his legs a little bit more. Some more quarterback designed runs. I think they can pressure more, force him into mistakes. I think it'll be close, relatively speaking, but I think Indiana gets it done. In Sig, we trust. Duck, I'll go to you next. What are you seeing here in Oregon, Indiana?
I mean, I did play the first half under way early before we saw some movement in this total, but Indiana has just been incredible. Absolutely has proven that they belong as the front runner, as the favorite to win these FBS playoff national championship. And really, they've spoken loudest in the trenches. Their trench play has just been absolutely lights out. You knew in the first three drives against Alabama that they were not going to be able to move the football and score a lot of points there. And it allowed the offense to just run the ball, be vanilla. They didn't have to give a lot away. They didn't have to take a lot of chances. It was a really, really buttoned up, impressive performance. And it's interesting in that first meeting of the season between Oregon and Indiana. I mean, Oregon scored one offensive touchdown. They ran the ball 30 times for 81 yards. Indiana has given up some explosiveness on the ground this season, but seventh nationally in yards per carry, surrendered fourth in overall defensive success rate. I just don't see Oregon lining up with the ability to run the ball. So now you're going to task Dante Moore in throwing against an elite Indiana secondary. I'd say it was average the first meeting. I think he completed 21 of 34 for less than 200 yards, had a couple picks. If you get pressure with him, it's going to be really tricky here. And the way that this Indiana team, everything they're doing, everything they say, they show up on every single play for 60 minutes. I would not want to fade Signetti here.
Yeah, I think, but I Pregnon, the guard for Oregon, I think he's one of the best offensive linemen in the country, in my opinion. But I think that Harkey and World, their tackles are overrated. I know World is like loved by a lot of NFL scouts, but these are guys who came from Nevada and Texas State. They got abused in the first matchup. When I watch them against like really, really elite defenses, they can be beat. And Indiana beat them in the first meeting. I think they'll be able to beat them here. The Indiana offensive line, that's the most improved unit for on Indiana's team from last year. They have elite trenches now. I mean, Carter Smith is incredible at tackle. Pat Coogan, um, Drew Evans, who was hurt late last year in the College Football Playoff, he's incredible at guard. This offensive line, I'll take the Indiana offensive line over the Oregon offensive line. That's important here. Yeah, I agree with you on the Hoosiers. Calabrese, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I would love to get a three, but I'm just going to take the money line pregame on Indiana, lay the minus 175. And to me, it's as simple as this Dante Moore profile. Because you look around the internet right now, and God save him, he's mocked to the New York Jets, second overall in the NFL draft this spring. I don't see an elite, unflappable college quarterback when he plays against really good defenses. I see game manager plus. But in this matchup, for some reason, the market is still viewing him as someone who can elevate this Oregon team over Indiana. And he can when the running game's cooking, when he's working with his RPOs, his play action game, when he's operating from a clean pocket, as you brought up, Stuck. He's capable of putting up big numbers. 77% of his dropbacks, he was operating from a clean pocket this fall, and he cooked up 27 big time throws in those environments, 25 TDs against his six picks, with an adjusted completion percentage of 83.4%. But that is all built on Dan Lanning's roster architecture. Elite offensive line, a stable of running backs, which is important now because they're down Davison as well. So now really only two guys who have experience this season and a blue chip pedigree, and a playbook that was devised by Will Stein, who's no longer there. So I look at this as like a lot of his stats, Dante Moore's, it was a bit of empty calories. Over a third of his passing touchdowns came when Oregon was up by 22 points or more this season. But when the chips were down and he was facing elite defenses, it was a different story. Penn State, Iowa, Indiana, Texas Tech, all top 25 defenses. QBR in those games, 51.8 out of 100, 6.1 yards per attempt, four touchdowns, four picks. So I look at this as if the running game is contained and he has to be the guy in known passing situations. I think he turns from a top NFL draft pick into just another guy. And Indiana sacked him six times in their first meeting. And how did their defense do without Daly, which I think was a critical talking point going into the Rose Bowl? 40 dropbacks for Simpson and Mack in that Rose Bowl for Bama, 16 pressures. That's 40% of the time. When you look at what Moore has been accustomed to, he's had an awesome offensive line in front of him with just a 23% pressure rate. That doubled against Indiana in the first meeting. 48% of his dropbacks, he was under fire. So I think they're going to make life miserable for this kid. I think they also have the run defense to put him in those known, passing situations early and often. They were top five in rushing success, top five in line yards and tackling. I just don't see this guy pulling the rabbit out of his hat and making the big plays to get them over the hump. It may end up being a lower scoring game. That's why I'm not interested in laying the 4.5. But minus 175, like I said before the Bama game, I think we're going to look back and wish we had more invested in Cignetti. He's somebody that we've been, tailing since he got to Indiana. Why stop now?
Yeah, Will Stein will be coaching, right? He just left the team this week.
I would say,
Yeah.
to frame that properly, kind of in the same light as 1 foot out the door, where's his head? Charlie Weiss Jr. situation, same thing going on with Ole Miss and LSU. A lot of prep needs to be done against Cignetti, who is an ultimate prep kind of guy. So I think in that situational football, all the stats that you brought up, particularly on third downs, that's where Indiana wins the day.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's just kind of tells the story of the current college football landscape. Oregon beats Texas Tech to advance the college football playoff semifinal. Stein immediately flies to Kentucky, handles all the recruiting, portal,
Sam
coaching
Levitt.
duty stuff. What's that?
Sam Levitt.
Sam Levitt.
For Sam Levitt Day.
I think Sam Levitt, it's going to come down to Simpson comes back to Bama. Maybe Levitt ends up at Alabama if not. But yeah, and then the Ole Miss coaching situation, like it's a mess. They have to change the calendar in some aspect, but he definitely doesn't have his full undivided attention on this game. Colin, what are you seeing here? You actually like the Ducks. You're
Yeah.
fading Sig.
Well,
Good luck.
I think it's important to lay out the financial plan for everybody. I do have an Oregon 15-1 in the app, Oregon 15-1 ticket on hand. I also bet Oregon +4, which has gone to 3.5. I would still bet 3.5. I'm not sure Oregon's going to win this game, but they're going to cover this number. They're going to, and I'll take any bets. They're going to cover this number. I think and that's tough to say because right now Indiana's playing so clean, it's almost immaculate. It's like a 6-0-6-0 set from ladies tennis. I mean, it's just insane. Like you can't even try to poke holes into the stats and the analytics and the game logs and the yards per play and the Cignetti calls and watching him live on the field at the Rose Bowl, like what he does, like when the defense is on the field, he stands completely back on the other side of the sidelines and just it says one thing and then the whole defense changes. Like it's amazing what this team is like a machine. They're like the Empire. It's crazy. But how is Oregon going to cover this number? And just to let everybody know, that is what I'm going into this pregame. I will be betting Indiana live if they fall to money line -110 or have plus anywhere beside them. I will be doing that. Not so much with Ole Miss Miami. I am doing it here. So Oregon is the game is going in, and I like the over here. Because if you go back and look at week 7, which I think you should throw out the window, but red zone and third downs are what determine that game. And Oregon has to be better in red zone attempts, both offensively and defensively, and in third down. And if they're not going to win this game at all. But I think there's an avenue to where this is a different team than what we saw in week 7. I know you can go back and look at all the logs and see how they've kind of morphed and changed defensively. They grinded out the Iowa game on the ground, but now they're missing their biggest piece as a running back. They're going to have to pass it more. Decoring more only got 2 targets against Texas Tech. I think they're playing a little coy with him. I think he's more healthy than they think. Evan Stewart, we're going to see the availability report is again coming out in 5 minutes as we record this. If they can't get it done on the ground, because inside zone has been good for Oregon. They produced 63%, but there's nothing you can run that Indiana can't sniff out. They've been elite against every run concept. They've stopped everybody from running the ball. I expect Oregon to average maybe 2.5 yards per play on the ground. That might be nice. Indiana's vulnerability is against the explosive pass. I mean, their numbers, you look up and down, the whole entire thing is green except for one area. Passing downs, explosives allowed, and creating a contested catch. Passing downs, explosives allowed, 82nd in the nation. Creating a contested catch, 62nd. You can go out to CFB stats. They're outside the top 25 when it comes to allowing 10 plus and 20 plus yard passes. Now, that's
It's an aggressive defense. They're going to allow some plays to get behind them.
And if that happens here, they have to be good enough in tackling. And I'm just trying to make a case to say this is how Oregon's going to work downfield. It's a fast track. It kind of plays into their favor. We'll see if they can keep Dante Moore up. We'll see if and by the way, against Texas Tech, average depth of target, 6.2 yards, but they still had a half dozen explosive plays in the passing game. They're allowing their receivers to do all the work. It's not really Dante Moore like looking deep shots. He will take a shot. Really, the wide receivers have been the beef of this offense. But Indiana's only 46 in creating pass breakups. And if Oregon wants to win, they've got to go to the air. And Dante Moore's 58% against cover three. He gets to see it again. Indiana's defense hasn't changed, and they allowed 9 explosive passes in total against Ohio State and Alabama in consecutive games. So if Oregon can have a little bit better red zone luck, I think they can get points on the board and have enough to get the over and to cover this game. But the real change is on the defense. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. I mean, yeah, I've been a big proponent of Indiana and Kalen Black running power and Roman Himby running inside zone. Like I said, they are immaculate. They are just tearing everybody apart. But Oregon has completely changed their defense. They've made a small little change on the back end that not a lot of people are talking about. Tosh Lupoi decided to leave a cover three, go to a cover two hybrid, and have Dylan Thieneman roam like Caleb Downs at Ohio State. It sucked against James Madison. I watched that. I watched the all 22 on that. They couldn't tackle anybody. They were letting everybody go by. I don't think Thieneman even knew how to play this roaming. You go back and watch Texas Tech, 5 missed tackles. They dominated them every single part of the defense, and Lupoi has thrown this little wrinkle in that's allowing them to kind of play Caleb Downs what he was doing last year in the playoff. And they've even admitted like this is what Ohio State did with to their defense in the playoff. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, and the fact that Oregon is sixth in PFF coverage and they're 10th in creating a contested catch. I just talked about Indiana. They can't contest catches and they don't create PBUs, but Oregon does at a top 10 level. And here's a stat I couldn't believe. Did you guys know that Fernando Mendoza has created a big time throw against every single FBS team on the Indiana schedule except one team? He didn't have one against Oregon in week 7. He had
Oh,
no.
we were throwing out that game.
He didn't have a big time throw.
The 10-point win on the road with even with a pick six, we're throwing that out, right?
Well, listen, Fernando Mendoza did not have a good game against Oregon.
You
And
know
now
who did have a good game against Oregon, though? Elijah Surratt. And they had no answers for him. 8 catches, 122 yards, touchdown. I think he's a problem in terms of what they're able to do, rolling coverage his way. And the other part of it, in terms of throwing into this Indiana defense, Ja'Cory Moore was healthy in that game. Sadiq was healthy. They had 6 catches total for 60 yards. If that is replicated in any way, shape, or form, if that duo does not go for 100 yards, I think Oregon's drawing dead
it
in this game.
wasn't
They
their
got to
game
find
plan.
ways.
It wasn't
Davison
their
was
game
the
plan.
best player on offense
Their
that
their
day.
game plan was to line up and try to punch him in the face with the run game, and that's
But
not
they
going to
also
work
had a
against
game
them.
flow in the second half where they needed to throw the ball to be able to get back in it, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah,
So
they pressured on
I think,
20, 20 dropbacks. Yeah, Davison was their best player, and he's going to be out with a broken clavicle. The one change for the Oregon offense is they have finally realized that Benson is better than Bryant, who's now been pretty much phased out of the rotation. Johnson's emergence as well. I think the Oregon offense is a little bit better than it was then, but Indiana continues to improve. I mean, I just think this goes back to like what the Alabama handicap, Indiana, Alabama. One team's going to be able to run the ball, and one team's going to be able to generate more pressure consistently. And then Indiana is like the most well executing team in the country. So I think
Mendoza,
that's the difference.
listen, I think Indiana's going to create methodicals and they're going to get into scoring position, but they're not going to have explosive plays. They're not going to have explosive passes, and Hemby and Kalen Black are going to get tackled first time they get touched. So it
I mean,
really
you
comes down
mentioned
to
that
the red
Indiana
zone.
gives up explosives. I mean, Oregon's pass explosive. They're like in like the 65th percentile. This isn't like an Ole Miss passing offensive passing attack. And like you said that, oh, Alabama and Ohio State, who might have the two best receiving core. I'll take Alabama and Ohio State's wide receivers over Oregon's. You said that they hit, 6 explosives. They combined for 13 points.
9.
Nine
Alabama and Ohio
explosives,
State had 9
13
explosives.
points combined. And
Look,
those teams are more explosive than
I
Oregon.
said the results have to change in the red zone, right? Indiana can be taken in their secondary. The
And
Oregon's
they gave up
got to.
13 combined points to Alabama and Ohio State.
Didn't you take Oregon to cover two
In what game?
against Indiana here?
No,
I had Indiana in that game. Thanks for asking, Colin.
No, this game.
no, I have Indiana.
Oh, okay.
Well, I have Indiana money line to close out some parlays.
All right.
I'm waiting
I'll
for
be on an
third.
island here, but Oregon's covering. So,
All right, we shall see. All right, that'll do it. I like when we disagree, get some differing viewpoints late in the season. But before we do get out of here, as we do on all of our bowl season previews, it's time for our DraftKings parlay. We'll each pick our favorite play from this episode, throw in a parlay over at DraftKings. Just give your favorite single bet from this podcast. I'm just gonna throw out Indiana money line. Get it done. We'll start things there. Colin, what do you want to throw in?
Give me Daquan Wright over 25.5 receiving yards for Ole Miss. Trinidad Chambliss is going to go to the air over the middle between the hash marks and who has been the big target in the biggest games this season against Georgia, Alabama. It doesn't matter who Ole Miss has played. Daquan Wright has played a big role in the biggest games. Give me over 25.5 receiving yards.
Duck, you're rolling back with the Miami Ole Miss first half under.
Yeah, we'll use that one here too. I could support an Indiana money line position as well, but we'll go first half under here. I've covered it pretty extensively, but I feel pretty strong about where that's going to end up.
And Mike, you're closing things out with the U.
You laying 3.5. You'd be hard pressed to find three better wins. They beat A&M, they beat Notre Dame, they beat Ohio State. They're going to beat Ole Miss and cover this number.
So we got Daquan Wright over receiving yards, Miami Ole Miss first half under, Miami minus 3.5, Indiana money line pays 10-1 over at DraftKings. We'll drop a link in the podcast and YouTube description. We'll also tweet it out. Go use that link to instantly add the bet to your bet slip at DraftKings and let's get it home. The crown is yours. By the way, part 7, our final episode, will air. We'll record that on the 15th, Thursday night. We'll preview the national championship game as well as hand out the gambling Heisman. We'll go over the past winners. I'll give you a little teaser. Here are the nominees: David Bailey, Texas Tech; Lucky Sutton, San Diego State; Brock Lowry, Western Michigan; Bear Bachmeyer, BYU; Drew Mestamaker, North Texas. I'll explain why those are the nominees, and we'll pick our winner on Thursday night. We'll also award our voicemail caller of the year, go through some of the funniest voicemails of the season, and we will go live before the national championship game on Monday, the 19th. College basketball episodes are back. I'll be joining the fold after the national championship, back on those normal episodes, but there's already episodes that are coming out weekly, so make sure you check out those. And if you want to tail some of the bets we discussed today, look for the quick slip link in the video and podcast description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Thanks to Colin, Mike, and Duck for joining me. Thanks to our producer David on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. If we've won you any money all year long or you've enjoyed the podcast, make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy, and leave a 5-star review. They really help us out. Thanks again for tuning in. Good luck on all of your wagers. Only 3 college football games left. Enjoy them, and good luck on all of your wagers. We will see you next week. Cheers.